Hey, my name is Chris, and today I'm going to be looking over the issue of whether athletes and the general public should be allowed to continue the sport of boxing, and I'm going to justify why boxing should not be banned. So to give a little bit of context, boxing is one of the world's oldest sports, and many people have been playing it for thousands of years. And as we know, the world of boxing is a very dangerous place, but there's a lot of people that find entertainment from it. So after multiple millennia of evolution, boxing has become one of the most popular physical contact sports, and some of the attributes that are needed to play the sport are mental resilience, intelligence, and raw strength. And as we've seen, some of the views of society have modernized, so there have been multiple concerns about brain injuries, the legitimacy of the judges, the rules, and whether or not corruption still exists in boxing. So some of the things that I'm going to cover in this video are how boxing helps people in poverty, the influence of the coaches on the fighters and the boxing world, the promoters and influencers, the ring doctors, and the dependence of the fighters. I'm going to use these 5 points to show why boxing should not be banned. So starting off with my first point, I'm going to be explaining how boxing helps and lifts people out of poverty. So my first example is actually about Mike Tyson. He's one of the most famous heavyweight champions, and he was actually arrested about 32 times by the time he was 12, and he met a guy named Bobby Stewart, which introduced him to his trainer eventually, Cus D'Amato, and together they both helped him get free of the crime world. And from that day forward, he used boxing as a motivation and a reminder that if he failed, he would return to his previous life in crime. And to this day, Tyson believes that as long as people have discipline, they'll be immune from corruption, crime, and they will make people successful in and out of the ring. And this was actually one of the key philosophies of Cus. He believed that his mental practices would help people, it would help grow their character, and it would help them just be successful overall. And going along those points, boxers enter the sport knowing that there's many risks like getting hurt, and they eventually have to accept these risks in order to win the champion belt. So moving on to my second point, I'm going to be talking about the influences the coaches have on their fighters and on the world of boxing. So for example, Cus consistently used his mental strategies and sometimes even stasis theory to help develop his fighters. And there are many other coaches like him that help their fighters stay out of crime, and they teach them some important things like how to build their character and how to be more likable in society. Now, a good coach would try to discover the inner conflict within the fighter and teach them how to manifest the killer instinct that they have from their harsh childhood to help them improve in boxing and to keep them out of crime ultimately. Now, that brings me to my third point, which is the promoters and the influencers of boxing. And again, I'm going to use another Cus D'Amato quote from Mike Tyson's book, Iron Ambition. He says, "Boxing is entertainment. He wins in an exciting manner. He must throw punches with bad intentions." Now, this is done to entertain the crowd and to also utilize the boxer's harsh background to help them make money legally. So my fourth issue is a little bit more controversial because it has to do with the health aspect of boxing and the ring doctors associated with that. So for example, some countries have already tried to ban boxing, but they weren't successful because they weren't able to ban the actual sparring sessions. So as we can see in the past, banning boxing was not successful because people still held the private matches and they were actually unregulated. And this means that there was no ringside doctors or they were poorly trained, and this led to more injuries. So if boxing were not banned, this would allow for the doctors to be trained better, which would eventually make the sport safer, and with the referees they could reduce the bout length depending on their discretion and the standing 8 count. And also recently there have been some amendments to the rules in boxing which encourage the body shots more than the head shots, which overall will lead to less brain injuries. So last but not least, I'm going to introduce how boxers influence their families and sometimes other people in societies and even companies. So some of the examples that I have are Tyson, Muhammad Ali, and Sugar Ray Leonard. They actually returned to their families after some of the fights that they had, and they would give them part of their money, and they would donate and they would raise charities to help other people. And because of that, say Tyson's family, they actually became silent stakeholders because they became dependent on the money that he brought in. And eventually, Tyson's mother was diagnosed with cancer, and Tyson wasn't able to fund her treatment with the money that he had accumulated from his fights. Now, this goes to show how important boxing family members are on the makeup of, say, poorer families, because they're more reliant on the boxers to bring in the money. And on top of this, boxing has a large stake in the nutrition and the fitness industry, and fighters may inspire their families and other people to become more healthy. So in conclusion, boxing is actually one of the largest physical contact sports in which many athletes compete to be the best for themselves and for others. And I just want to thank you for your time, and hopefully this video persuaded you to vote against the banning of boxing.